Welcome to the Surviving the Holiday Season. So, tips to manage your mental health. Um, I'm sure many of us can relate to this picture right here, especially those of us that are responsible for organizing or planning or feel like we have a million and one obligations around the holidays. And so, this whole webinar, this whole discussion, this community conversation is centered around those that feel like this, especially around the holidays, when it's the intent for us to be able to gather with friends and family and enjoy the holiday season. But oftentimes, because of all the demands on top of our normal demands, we have the demands of the holidays. So this whole conversation will be dedicated to those that feel like this during the holiday season. We don't want you to feel that way. So I'm going to introduce myself just in case you're not familiar with who I am. My name is Crystal. I am a mental health advocate, and I'm the founder of uniquelynoble.com. Also, I'm the host of a podcast called Unique Conversations with Chris. And so the purpose behind both of those organizations and both behind all the content that I create is I want to create a space to where we can have conversations about self-love, self-care, and mental health, as well as all things mental and physical well-being. And so at the beginning of this year, I started thinking about the idea of having something called community conversations. And so what I've envisioned for that is a place where I can have open and candid conversations with members of the community that service us in the aspect of mental health, wellness, physical wellness, and all the things in between. And so one of the things that I created was a um, both in person and a virtual uh, community conversation. So this will be my first virtual one. We had our first physical one last month in honor of World Mental Health Day, but this one is going to be just being mindful of the holidays and everyone's busy schedules. I will host a few of them virtually. So it's just a really long-winded way of saying this is the purpose and the why behind my events. And we have Miss Davina, linguist. She is a licensed professional counselor. But Davina, I think I'd like for you to, I guess, do it more justice and introduce yourself and give a little bit about background as to who you are in your practice.
Yeah, my name is Davina Linguist, associate, and I consider myself Alexander, PhD, LLC, which is a licensed provider. My background is actually 30 years at corporate, and then I transitioned into becoming a therapist. With that background, it also includes, working in HR, recruiting, and I just felt like at times I wanted to continue to help people, right? And so work in the behavioral health, hospital setting, hospital group setting, and then individual practice. So again, thank you so much for inviting me.
No, no worries. I'm excited to have you along. So the idea of this is we will go through and this is the agenda for tonight's conversation. And so these are the three key areas of where we will talk about things. The first one is just managing expectations. So like I mentioned earlier, is that we have to recognize that holidays don't have to be stressful. And so what we're going to do is take you through some scenarios and give you helpful tips and strategies so that way you don't find yourself stressed and that you have more peace this holiday season. And then the next thing we'll talk about on our agenda is just practicing self-care and some practical ways because oftentimes, we hear self-care and we equate it with bubble baths and spa days, but self-care is so much more than those typical things that you see people practice to say they're practicing self-care. While it is included, but their self-care is so much more than just those things. And then also to recognizing that, yes, while the holidays can be a nice time of the year to spend time with family, get together with people you haven't seen all year, or just spend special time together. We recognize that there is a community of individuals that actually struggle around this time. So the holidays can trigger some anxiety, depression, and or grief with some individuals. And so we want to reach out and give out some helpful tools and strategies and way that we can honor those feelings, but at the same time, take care of ourselves with our mental health. And so um, this is just, more about me and how you can reach me. My website is here. And at the end of this conversation, what we'll do is I will be sending out a some printables. I can't think of the word. Some printables or some resources with all the information for both myself and Davina. And then here is Davina, and here's her um, intro, and then how you can reach her. Mm. And so the first question I want to ask is, how are you feeling about the upcoming holidays? Are you excited? Are you anxious? Are you overwhelmed? Are you just kind of like they're here? And so just to take a moment to think about and check in with yourself. And that's kind of what I'm going to encourage you to do throughout this session is check in with yourself and ask yourself honestly how you're feeling. I know for me sometimes because, you know, the time of year, especially, Christmas, Thanksgiving, we're conditioned to believe that this is a time where we should be grateful or we're here to celebrate the reason for the season. And we kind of look past how we're feeling. And so I'd encourage you guys to all take a moment to sit and reflect and think about how you're really feeling. And so that way we can honor any of those emotions that may come up so that we can address them and acknowledge them and then actually have true joy and true happiness and true peace during this time. Okay. So, just to give you a few facts and statistics, I am about the reality of the holiday season, and the reality of holiday stress. You see here that, 38% of people report increased stress during the holiday season. And it can come from anything from family members that can have conflict or, and I know a lot of people are facing financial strain and pressures, with coming with gift giving and then just feel like they're obligated to overextend and do all the things that come along with holiday season. And then you also have 64% of the individuals that feel like they're pre-existing or the existing mental health conditions say they worsen during the holidays. And feel free to hop in on this one, but I know for one of the things and the statistics around loneliness, I would assume that it's more exacerbated around this time of year. So that may be one of the reasons why many of the mental health um, people report that their mental health declines during the holiday season. And then there's, about 56% of the individual Americans experience heightened stress, and it's just, again, through um, the social obligations, holiday expectations, and all the other things that come along with celebrating the holiday season. Do you want to add to
Think it
that,
definitely
Sabina?
provides
I feel like I've said
a full awareness of one, normalizing that holiday loneliness, that stress that you feel. You're not by yourself, and it definitely impacts
it.
a lot of different
Hmm.
people, and there's no discrimination related to that. It comes in for all people from all different backgrounds, all cultures, and again, it gives you a real view of what really goes on around the holiday time.
Right, right. And just to know that if you are included in the population of these people that are reporting these things, that you're not alone. Because I think I kind of touched on it just a second ago, is oftentimes you feel like, well, if I'm sitting here saying that I'm, mopey, sad, or stressed, then I might be seen as the Grinch or someone that doesn't enjoy Christmas or holidays. And so just to reinforce the fact that many of us feel the same way, I would say, 64% of people with mental health conditions say it gets worse. That's a pretty big number um, reported of people
So and that's
feeling a
also essential
decline
in making people take
around
it,
the
right?
holidays. Right, right. There are some people that are literally struggling with whatever circumstances they have at this time. And so this is another point where I'd encourage you, whether you're listening in and on live or if you're looking at the recording, but kind of check in with yourself and say, what are your thoughts? What stresses you the most during the holidays? Um, so that as we're going through this, you can take a note of some of the tools, tips, and strategies that we'll provide so that you can, put them to use. So tips for managing expectations, because that's one of the things that I've seen most frequent when it comes to people reporting stress is I have all these expectations to go to this relative's house or do this thing or make sure I go to all the company parties or participate in all the holiday related activities. And so one of the first things that came to mind when putting together this um, deck of suggestions and tips is finding ways to simplify your schedule. So, and just like I mentioned, it's quite possible, or it's very, especially if you're a person who likes to appease and please others, to say yes to everything. Um, and so one of the things you want to do, and I'm going to keep saying encourage yourself to check in with yourself, is avoid by overcommitting and prioritizing the most important activities. So what this would look like, let's say that overall your family may have 4 or 5 parties, or you may have, if you're married, you have your spouse's work thing, you have yours, you have the kids, you have, your friends that's hosting her Friendsgiving or whatever the case may be. But you can take a overall um, um, what am I trying to say? Inventory of all the things that you have to do. And then maybe prioritize a list. Say, okay, I want to commit to 4 uh, events this year or 4 parties this year. And you sit and figure out which ones are the most important to you, and give yourself permission to cancel or skip things that may increase your stress,
So
right?
that's really being intentional as we kind of go through, as we're going through some of
Mhm.
these tips and different you know, recommendations. It's really about being intentional because you can does not mean that it's always meant for you to do.
Mhm.
So that means, great, we want you to be able to sacrifice for yourself, but show up in a way that's healthy. And so being able to say no sometimes has to be practiced. And so that means, as it says, give yourself permission to cancel or skip 1 or 2 events so you can be healthy and so for yourself.
Mhm. Yep. The next tip is focus on what you can control. One of the biggest pieces of advice that I got early from a therapist that I maybe had 1 or 2 sessions with is, if you didn't cause it, cure it, or control it, then you shouldn't be stressed about it. And that's something that was, stuck in my brain from her. And it's like, focus on what you can control. What can you control? Whether or not you go to this event or whether or not you choose to spend this amount of money. That's what you can control. What you cannot control is how people will react to you and whatever boundary or whatever decisions that you make. So you tell Aunt Sally Sue that, hey, I'm not going to be able to make it to your Christmas cookie bake off or whatever, or cookie exchange. she may be hurt, her feelings may be upset, but you can't control that. So you have to let go of those unrealistic expectations sometimes people put on us or we put on ourselves, and then kind of let go of the perfectionism. And that's something I'm going to be quite honest is that I'm really having to work to do because oftentimes, especially if you're a person that looks at the picture perfect Pinterest, worthy celebrations and you held yourself to that standard, then, if things don't go the way that you're wanting them to go or you desire them to go, then you find yourself in a whirlwind of frustration and stress brought about by yourself. So it's just, kind of focus on what you can and can't control. We can control and not what you can't. So, and even, some people, when it comes to this, to be put it a little bit more I guess specific or, family members, there might be that one family member that's just really abrasive and not easy to get along with. It could be um a spouse, a co-parent, or even a parent. And so you can only focus on what you can control and not what
And sometimes
they're
control,
exactly doing
sometimes
now.
control means simple as having the way. If you have to know your limitations, um,
Hmm.
you mentioned boundaries, and so those, even if you decide to go, there's still boundaries that you need to set. And we talked a little bit about that before. Is definitely in we just coming through a election. There's politics. People have a lot of opinions, but at the end of the day, it's being respectful. And
Hmm.
when you feel like, hey, this is a trigger for me, and maybe a person is still processing, people have different views,
Hmm.
and you so make it a point to remove yourself. And sometimes that is self control is saying, okay, you know what, this is probably I do appreciate
Yeah.
you, being here, whatever that conversation may look like. But being able to control yourself, self control
Hmm.
can be difficult. But it also means removing yourself if need be.
Right. Yep. I completely agree. And then one of the things that I know that I hear and I've heard the most common over the last few years is spending, and that can be a source of stress. And there are people that, especially considering those that maybe experience job loss or, a reduce in income in some kind of way, or maybe more bills or higher, whatever the case may be, people's financial situations change. But in the case of some people that I know is, although my financial situation has changed and not necessarily for the better, but for a more lean financial situation, people may have this expectation that, well, you always give these lavish gifts, or, mom has always given us these things, or maybe we're putting that pressure on ourselves to continue to do the things that we've always done. And so I think one of the biggest tips that I would like to encourage those is to set a realistic budget of you feel comfortable with, and remember the intent and the reason for the holidays is not necessarily to get these big lavish gifts or go on social media and see these people that are buying these big lavish gifts, but stick to what being rings true for you. And maybe that means not going on social media and looking at seeing what Barbara Jean has got or whatever, or what they're doing for their children or what gifts they're getting their children. Um, because there's a whole, um, and I don't know if this is just me, but there's a whole group of individuals that go and say, hey, this is what I'm buying my kids for Christmas. And they have 50 plus expensive toys, and you looking at this and like, well, I can only really can afford to get them one Barbie doll and a book and maybe some pajamas, and now you're starting to feel guilty or putting yourself in financial risk of making poor choices to try
Point.
to keep up appearances.
Things
And so,
isn't
um,
what you control. But it, when people are going on social media,
right,
never what it appears to be. Remember that, right? You know, I'm not a big social media person, and I know the
Right.
time and the society that we live in, but sometimes those kids would just want time with parents. So that's why I say it's never what it appears to be. So, not judging, not criticizing, just manage yourself in a way that helps to bring life and not in a way that puts you at risk where you're having to be in a worse position than you were
Right. And I agree because I know that there were people that will put themselves into more debt to try to make sure that everyone's expectations and the expectation you put on yourself, which in it ultimately causes you to start off the new year stressed, and it's carrying on from you carrying December stress to, July because you're still trying to figure out how you're going to recover from
private.
overspending, in
One
the
thing
holiday
I would
season.
add, sometimes the gift is giving people time, and we'll talk a little bit about that. I think as we go on, when we're talking
Hmm.
about caretakers or caregivers, rather, sorry, caregivers, um, where
Hmm.
they're trying to look for respite, where they, hey, I need a day off and I need somebody to help me with my, foster kids or help me. I take care of two of my grandkids, and so sometimes it's not always about the buy as it
Hmm.
is, hey, I just need some time. Maybe it's, babysitting for a single parent that has three kids and she just needs time to go get her nails done. So it doesn't always have to be so costly. And those are gifts that, hey, anyone that needs
Hmm.
some time would definitely raise their hand. Single parent caregivers, whatever they may look like, to say, hey, I'll take it, right?
Hmm.
You too.
Yeah, I'll take I'll take
Absolutely.
an afternoon to even just take a nap. So, yeah, and I think that's one of the things here is, quality time, personalized gifts, something that just to me, the things that are made specifically for me with me in mind, have more sentiment. And you got to think about as kids, yeah, they may want the newest or the greatest eh, video game system or toy or the whatever's going, but and I know this as a parent because I used to be one of the ones that you go out and buy all these, gadgets for my kids. And, by the end of Christmas break, they're like, well, I'm bored. I don't have anything to play with. And, or literally have a game that they've never even touched because they wanted it, play with it for a few minutes, and now they're done, you know? So just that overconsumption of things. And then the last and final thing that I have is, and I've kind of touched on this before, it was limited access on social media. So, and I think I made this one a specific one again by itself is because I know that people, and more often, especially as the generations are getting younger, they're looking to social media as a baseline or a guideline as to what is normal and what things should be, setting an expectation. Um, and so if you know that, opening up Facebook or Instagram or TikTok or whatever the social media that you use, that you're going to be privy and exposed. And I'm going to give you something that's more simple. Like, I know for me, opening up those social medias and seeing, oh, they got this new trend of decorations, and now I want to go and redecorate because I like the way they did it. And here I am looking at their grand Christmas tree or their 7-foot Christmas tree or whatever. And I'm like, dang, I want to get one. And now I'm, you know, putting in my mind that I need to go spend a couple of $100 for this Christmas tree because I want it to look like theirs. And I don't want to say that I'm comparing or I'm jealous. It's just that, that just kind of, if you overconsume social media, then you'll start to
Exactly.
think in
And
your mind that what
that's
you
one of the
have is
reasons,
not
too,
enough.
I don't always post on social media. Most people just think that they have to have it. Don't get me wrong. I recognize that people celebrate. But social media is about seeing me.
Mhm.
To see what I'm doing, see what I'm doing, all of those things. I think there is a healthy limit, and recognizing when
Mhm.
you begin to kind of do the whole comparison. Um, living within your means, and
Mhm.
again, sometimes it's not always what it appears to be.
Yeah, yeah. I think we're kind of starting to see the veil
Yeah.
between what's reality and
Mhm.
what's behind the scenes on social media. It's not always what it presents to be. And so, and this really taking that time to focus on you and your own experiences and not necessarily trying to curate the perfectly constructed
Right. Mhm.
um
Really,
view
what
so
you
that
want
people
people to
can
see, and people spend a
to
lot of time doing
feel
that.
like you're
It's say curating what you want people to see, and at the end of the day, it's I think creating memories. Making memories that last and that you can live in a place of authenticity. Uh, that's important.
Mhm. Yep. And so the next thing is pause here for questions. And I don't see any, so we're gonna go forward. And I think you mentioned this before. Self-care strategies for caregivers and setting boundaries is the next section we'll talk about. And like I mentioned in the intro, is self-care is beyond nails and bubble baths and massages. It's typical or things that you can do that oftentimes don't cost you anything. So let's first of all, and I want to acknowledge because I believe November is um caregivers awareness month or something around caregiving. And you and I talked about spotlighting caregivers because oftentimes they're the ones that are the most stressed around the holidays because not only do they have a full load and it's so much to carry for them, the mental load to be a caregiver anyway, but to add on or, combine holidays, that can be a recipe for overwhelm and stress. And in fact, if you see the statistics, it's saying that 69% of the caregivers, so that's like, again, more than half of the caregivers that are, reported on this one particular study, say that they feel more stressed during the holidays because of the increase in responsibilities, the expectation, and time pressures. And then, the caregiving duties along with the holiday obligations impact their mental health, give them more anxiety, and just feeling overwhelmed. And so, just to take a moment to recognize that if you're considered a caregiver, and I'm going to go here, oh, I went backwards. Um, you know, sometimes you may not even realize that you're in the role of a caregiver. And so, just to take a moment to acknowledge and check in with yourself
Mhm.
to see if, you're technically considered a caregiver. So if you're someone that's caring for an elderly parent or a relative that needs help, um, supporting a spouse or partner dealing with chronic illness or disability, um, raising a child with special needs, um, providing emotional support to someone, that's being a caregiver and volunteering. And then of course I feel like, sometimes it's especially in your role of a parent, or sometimes if you're in a parent when you're alone or having to take care of
Mhm.
um grandkids, or just there's so many different, this is not the complete list, but these are just a couple of things to kind of get you to think like, well, actually maybe I am in a caregiver role, and even realize or get myself or acknowledge the fact that I am taking on a bit more
Absolutely.
than
Absolutely. And I
someone
can
else.
definitely relate.
So
Of course, we've
um
spoken where I am a caregiver to two of my grandchildren, one with special needs. And so, I think, again, going back to, I think
mhm,
one of the best gifts that you can give a caregiver is time, some respite time. Come by, see, hey, what can I do? Can I,
mhm,
go to the store for you, or give you
mhm,
to go to the store? This always has to be, that is priceless gifts, right? That you can never put, money cannot buy when people just need time. And so, shout out to all the caregivers that are, moving forward in spite of their own challenges. But taking a break, also recognizing self care is needed for yourself. Self care is needed. Even though you want to show up,
Yep.
there's not perfection as it is consistency. Um, and stepping away, simplifying
Mhm.
as much as you possibly can. We've always done this. Maybe you're caregiving, with taking care of a parent, where you are, used to mom, at one time mom could have done, she did big things for Christmas. So find that one thing. It doesn't have to be the 10 things, but find that one thing that will help, not only make memories, but, you know, um, share quality time with that parent if you're taking care of a parent or a loved one. It's important that just showing up for yourself and
Mhm.
not always trying to have perfection, but consistency.
Right. Yep. And I like that. Like you said, instead of trying to do the whole thing that grandma did or mom did, you're doing that one tradition and sticking with that and what you can have the capacity to do. Because I know that a lot of times with people, especially in caregiving roles, like to play superwoman, superman, and it's time to recognize that you don't have to do that. There's a way to still serve and care and take care for the loved ones, or like in this situation right here, providing emotional support. There's a way to still support someone and not have to take on that role of carrying it all alone, and taking that risk of, how they always say, pouring
Yeah,
from an empty cup or
absolutely. And
not
then
putting the mask on
one other point
yourself.
I would make, you
Um,
know, I would say, with caregivers, people will say, well, I'm worried about her. Worry makes it about you, concern makes it about them. Make sure you understand the difference. When you're concerned, you are finding a way to make it
that's a
about
good
you.
point.
When you're worried, you find a way to make it about you.
Hmm.
So just that's always a good thought. Um,
Hmm.
Make, I'm concerned about them. I want to make sure that what can I do as a concerned loved one? Worry does not produce anything good, right? Being
Hmm.
concerned.
Yeah, right. That's a good point. That's something I'll put in my toolbox of things to remember um in the future. Um, and so this is just another phrase or another concept to think about is, caregivers come in many forms, but if you're consistently, putting someone else's needs before your own, you're a caregiver. So it's not limited to the list I just showed. And so it's crucial that you recognize your need for your own self-care and to continue to support that sustainably. So you have to make sure you take care of yourself so that you can continue to pour and to serve others. So, here are a few of a list of self-care practices, like I said, that don't require you to go out and spend money, but it's things that you can do to make sure you're taking care of you. So one of the first things is, acknowledge your own needs. Caregiving is demanding. Caregiving is all-consuming thing sometimes, especially if you're taking care of someone with special needs or an elderly parent where they cannot, they're not independent. They don't have any autonomy in some cases. So you have to recognize that that's a lot to care for you, not only yourself, but you. And then if you're caregiving in a situation to where you have other family members that you have to support, that can be overwhelming. So just acknowledge that, hey, like you said, someone saying, hey, what do you need? Davina, oh, I need an hour or two just to do absolutely nothing. Maybe I want to spend an hour or two reading a book, or maybe I want to spend an hour or two just to go out for a walk and get some fresh air, enjoy some, sunshine. Or even also too is a part of that acknowledging is admitting and not feeling guilty. Because that's something else that I notice a lot of people in those positions or just period and saying, oh, yes, I do need help, and accepting that help, and advocating for yourself and saying, you know, instead of saying, oh, I'm okay, I got it, yes, I do need some help. if you could come on Thursdays at this time so that I could have this window so I can get these things done, or if I could just rest, that would be great. And you'd be surprised, you know. And so get rid of that shame and that guilt
I think
and
that's
accept
true,
the help.
right?
Uh, yes, yes. And then another one I put here is just setting boundaries, you know, making sure that you don't feel another thing with that guilt, feeling guilty of saying, hey, you know, after 7:30, I can't take any more phone calls because if this person is reaching out to you for emotional support and you know at 7:30 is your firm time, like, you know what, this is for me to restore and renew my mind, do my, you know, reading or, you know, do my devotional, whatever the case is, you don't feel guilty if this person calls you at 7, you know, 25 and it's like, hey, I got 5 minutes for you. You know, can we, you know, let me know what I can do for you in this 5 minutes. You don't feel guilty about saying, hey, this is my cutoff time. I know. Yeah. And then one of the things that I didn't realize the impact until um I want to say around COVID is how um impactful practicing mindfulness can be, and just being aware and being in your body, um and how it can bring you from a high anxious moment to, you know,
Mhm.
um a normal, uh what's it called, you know, activating your parasympathetic system is you know, practicing mindfulness. And I've even shared, you know, on some of the resources that I've shared on my own podcast is a grounding technique that I use. The 5 4 3 2 1, where you literally, the first 5 things is 5 things you can see. And then you focus on those 5 things. And then you will be, it's like you leveraging your senses and becoming very acutely aware of everything around you. So 4 things you can touch, you know, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and, you know, maybe 1 thing you can taste. But what it does is it takes your mind out of the busyness and it allows you to focus narrowly on what's going on around you. So, you know, in a situation to where maybe I know for me, grocery stores can be triggering because there's just a lot of sights and sounds and noises. And so I will sometimes use that just to kind of bring my brain to here and now versus um, being so preoccupied. And so um, maybe deep breathing and, you know, feel free to, if I'm missing some, but it's like journaling, anything that you can do to bring your mind to the here and now. Um, And then this is something that no matter if you hear me on my podcast or if you hear me in person or you see me just regularly out, and that's only because it's been ingrained with me because of all the providers that I've had. I've always emphasized the importance of sleep. And it wasn't until, you know, I embarked on my own physical and mental health journey that I realized that, you know, sleep is very important. And I started to do the research. And so that's something that I'm always going to advocate and speak and say a part of self-care is having a good sleep hygiene and sleep routine because, you know, one of the things that you could be doing to sabotage, you know, that is being on your phone or watching TV or you know, not having a good routine that kind of puts your body in that mental place of, okay, it's time to relax, it's time to rest, it's time to do this. So, you know, eating right before or drinking a lot or, you know, whatever it could be, that's not a good hygiene for you to get a good sleep. Um, and that's very important. Um, and
You know, if you don't have one now, maybe just simple things. You know, I have on my phone by a certain time, my phone just goes on sleep, do not disturb, um, and things like that, where
mhm,
you know, the magnesium, and we'll get into some of the other things, but I think definitely during the holidays, when I'm working with clients, it's always saying, what's your holistic approach? making sure that you keep that in mind. Vitamins, you work inside, vitamin D, having when you're deficient in that, uh, you then need to you will have like smooth different things like making sure that you are taking a holistic approach and being intentional, taking your vitamins, getting the sun on your face, right? If you work from home, take time out. And I have to make myself do that. Take time out and don't just sit in front of the desk the whole time. Take time out and get
Hmm.
the sun on your face.
Hmm. Yep. And I can speak from personal experience that one of the things with my first pregnancy, my OBGYN was a very big advocate of saying, make sure that you get your
Mm-hmm.
vitamin D's checked. That's something, especially being a woman of color, that it's because of the melatonin in or melanin in our skin that it, makes us harder to absorb. Then we're,
Right.
not drinking a lot of milk, then we're not getting outside. And so, like you, I'm taking advantage of this cooler weather that we have now in Texas, and I have it on my watch to, okay, at 11 I'm gonna go for a 15-minute walk. At 3 I'm gonna go for a 15-minute walk, or if it's in the morning before I start work, I'll take a walk and just allow myself to, one, get some exercise, and then two, get outside and be in nature and feel the sun. So all of which can be a part of the routine to help you get some good sleep later that night. Um, the next thing is for self-care practices, and this is not just for caregivers, it's just for anyone really, is to reach out for support and, get rid of that guilt, get rid of that shame. And support may not always look like what you expect it to. So it may not be family or friends. It may be a community resource where find things that you need, um, based on your circumstance. And then also schedule some me time. So for me, especially when my children are a lot younger, when they were going to bed at 6 or 7, it's kind of like, okay, from 7 to 8:30, it's really my time to me to just do things for me, whether it's reading a book or whether it's, binge watching a TV show or doing something that I want to do for me. And you'd be surprised that even, 15, 20 minutes or an hour to myself will leave you feeling, more
Yep.
restored and
I
rejuvenated
would totally agree.
at the end of that. So, um, yeah. And so, and that's just when I take a pause. And so, based on what we've shared so far, I want you to kind of think to yourselves, what's one self-care ritual you can commit to this holiday season? Whether it's getting outside, if it's, the weather is okay for where you are, or whether it's taking more me time or limiting social media. Just take a moment to reflect and think about what you're going to commit to yourself of how you can practice self-care this holiday season. So the next thing we want to talk about is boundaries. And I didn't include boundaries in the self-care because I felt like I wanted to bring awareness to boundaries in itself. I guess it's a form of self-care, but I really wanted to bring home the importance of having good boundaries. And of course, I pulled a quote from one of my favorite researchers, Brene Brown, and saying, daring to set boundaries is about having the courage to love ourselves even when we risk disappointing others. And I think that was so profound because that's the exact sentiment for a lot of people, especially people that have people pleasing or codependency or just period. They strive to please others, and we don't want to disappoint others. So boundaries is, once again, I went backwards. Let's go forward. Okay, so boundaries. How do you set boundaries? Um, and for me, when I think about boundaries, you think about physical boundaries. Like I put a fence around a certain thing so that it protects both myself and the other person or my family or whoever from the external situation. So you kind of have to think about boundaries that way in a physical, mental, or emotional sense. So, um, for instance, if I put a fence in front of my home, it's a very clear
You
communication
right,
to people on the outside. Hey, you just can't come in unless you're welcome. Especially if it looks very intimidating, like if I put barbed wire or, a sign that says do not enter or must be this person to enter. So, one of the things with boundaries is that it's not something that you want to be vague about. It's not something that you want to be shy about when it comes to yourself. It's just saying communicate clearly and honestly, not just for you, but also for the other person. Like this example says, I can only stay for an hour today. That's clearly stating the boundary, saying, hey, I'm not going to be able to stay all night. Or, if someone invites you out to a party or to an event, hey, you know what? I really need time for myself. I'm going to have to stay in and decline for today and be okay. You know, realizing that no is a full sentence. You don't have to explain. um, and then, another thing about boundaries for what I, discovered is using I statements is more powerful. And especially when it's, you want to practice effective communication with someone else. You don't want to feel like the boundary is person is being attacked with the boundaries. Like you always make me want to stay until,
right.
you always ask me to stay till 9 and I can't do that. But to effectively communicate that boundary and not have as much conflict as I need to be gone by 9 for me and not put it on the other person. So like it's saying here in the example, I need time to rest in the evening instead of saying, you're always demanding my time. Um, and I just think that's just a way to really state boundaries and reduce some of the resistance or
Well,
conflict
boundaries
that
can be
comes with that
used,
boundary
not
by
just
effectively
right.
communicating.
Boundaries can use,
Mm-hmm.
and sometimes again people get offended by that. Then the thing you have to question, um, you know,
Mm-hmm.
the people that you have in the circle. Are they, what's their intent? Is it they should also recognize that hey, if you need to do this for you, then do that for you. But if it's not for you,
Yep. Yep. And then that kind of rolls into saying no without guilt. So, like I mentioned earlier, no is a complete statement. So, hey, can you come out to the movies on Friday? No. And then just leaving it at that and not feeling like you have to explain. Or can you buy me this? No. Um, and just saying no is a form of self care and it helps reinstate your boundary. Um,
absolutely,
you know.
absolutely.
And then another one is to delegate tasks when possible. So, a boundary could be, you're in charge of Thanksgiving dinner and you decide that I'm going to do a main entree of meat and 3 sides. And they say, hey, I really want to have this candy yams. I really want this particular side that grandma used to always make. Well, you're more than welcome to make it yourself or find someone else to make it. But my boundary is that I'm going to make these 3 that I chose to make, and you guys can do. Or I can delegate it to give it someone else, or we can order the peach cobbler from this restaurant. But it's reinstating that this is my boundary. This is my physical boundary. This is what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to be in the kitchen sun up to sundown
Learn that as I got
alone.
older, and it was okay, raising kids and go through all the hustle with it, and then you can do it and spending money to get it, and then you have to come and cook it. We order this, so it wouldn't be everything, but some of those things I just had. hey, I spent the money, or I'd rather have the time, in my day, or just sitting down and
Hmm.
doing something versus go on hustle, right?
Yep. And one of the things that I had really started to do for a few years is I used to religiously order my groceries through like Instacart or the delivery services. And for a while, I was like, this is wasteful, this is extra money. But then you realize that I'm paying someone to help me out, and I'm getting that 2.5, 3 hours back. On top of, you say it's more money, but I don't know if you're anything like me, but if I see something in the store that looks interesting or something
Yeah,
tasty, I'm more inclined to spend more money to try that thing. Um, so I feel like that's another way of delegating, or not feeling ashamed when I used to have someone come in every couple times a month to come clean my home. That's delegating. That's, giving yourself that time back. And that's a form of self-care and not
so
feeling guilty like, oh, it's a waste of money or
and
I
people
could do it
people
myself.
will pay for what they feel like they need to themselves. So if the person may need New Jordans at the container, and be like, I just want somebody to so it's all about prioritizing and
Yeah.
what people feel like they need for
Yeah.
themselves. And so it just goes back to identify what you need to delegate. And don't be afraid to do it. That's also letting go of some control, right? You don't have to control everything. It's mine. I've been doing it for 10
Hmm.
years, and then you're trying to, it's like, okay, let it go. It's done, right? Let it go. So be inspired to just make new
Right.
memories, and do things differently. It does not always have to look the same, um, to get the result of, of that
Yeah.
feeling of togetherness or just time for yourself.
Hmm. Right. And then this is one of my favorite ones, and we even touched on this in our last community conversation that we had in person, is identifying and avoiding energy drains. So, like, one of the things that I encourage throughout this whole thing is checking in with yourself, throughout this presentation, or throughout this communication or conversation, is pay attention to how you feel when you're around certain people. I know that some of us, especially if you're being very intentional, you'll notice every time I get off the phone with Jane, I feel drained. Or every time I go around these family members, they seem to, you know, make me feel more down. And so recognize, protect your time, and recognize and be intentional about how much time and effort and energy you put into those situations that drain you. So that way you're not feeling drained all the time. So if you know that your Uncle Pete and his family tend to drain you, so rather than committing to being at their home for the entire Christmas party, maybe say, hey, I'll stop in for 15 minutes, greet people, drop off my gifts, exchange gifts, and then I'm going home because I know that if I stay there the entire time, Uncle Pete's going to talk about
Yeah.
politics. He's going to talk about, things I don't feel comfortable talking about, or they're going to be negative. Um, and so just not necessarily isolating yourself, but then just putting that firm boundary about, okay, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I can commit to because, it drains me. Just think of yourself like a battery. If I have an iPhone and I notice, okay, I have 25% battery on my phone, then I know that I can only do a limited amount of things before my phone dies. And if I want to preserve my battery life, then I'm going to be very intentional about what I'm doing until I'm able to go and recharge. And so in this situation, for you able to go and recharge at home or another situation to where you can feel restored, you don't want to die, your battery to die while you're in that situation. So So one of the things that I wanted to do is just kind of practice setting some boundaries. And so I'll read off a couple of scenarios, and either you can do this quietly to yourself, or, speak up and say something. But we're going to go through a few scenarios to practice going through what it's like to set boundaries in one of those uncomfortable situations. So I think we've touched on this a few times. Your family's planning a holiday dinner, and you've been asked to serve several dishes, and you're already feeling overwhelmed with work. You're a caregiver, and you have other commitments. What could you do? What would you recommend that someone in that situation do?
I think you need to just be upfront and honest. I think sometimes in situations we feel like we have to be somebody else and we set expectations or we allow other people to set expectations for us. So I'm always a believer that when you
Mm-hmm.
upfront and be just being truthful, that's all you can do. Living your truth
Mm-hmm.
and yeah,
Yeah,
let people know you have
yeah.
limitations and
That's
things.
something
You
you
know, hey,
could
I would love to
type
do
in.
X, Y, Z, but here's what I can do, right? That's the key word. Here's what I can do. And
Mm-hmm.
that
Mm-hmm.
this kind of communication is important, and
Mm-hmm.
we just spoke on it. Is use the I statement. Here's what I can do, and I think that's important. Just living your
Mm-hmm.
truth.
Yeah. And just not saying, or because what I could see happening is if you continue to allow yourself to be put in situations where you don't say no, you'll end up being, and I know from my personal experience, grumpy or resentful or sour because in your mind you already did not want to do it. And so if you end up making all the dishes, then people may not compliment you. You may not feel like you're getting what you deserve because you went out of your way when people didn't even realize it. Just like, oh, Crystal can do it, so let me ask her to make this and this. And now you're frustrated and stressed because you don't feel people will appreciate you or understand the sacrifice that you made. Well, you didn't put the boundary up and say that I can't do this. I don't want to sacrifice. I want to be able to sit back and enjoy my holiday like you.
People have
So
to treat you intentionally and
just,
unintentionally. We do that, and so is you're always the
hmm
go-to when you're saying yes, and that's what you right, right. So having those boundaries
hmm
keeps you safe. It's about you. So um, it's okay to let go and put the mask on you, as you say.
hmm yep. The next one would be the same thing we've kind of touched on is, the family expects lavish gifts. It's putting a strain on your finances. And this year you're wanting to stand up and put the boundary of saying, hey, you know what? I want to focus on my financial wellness and not get into more debt. And I would think just saying exactly that. There's nothing wrong with saying, hey, I'm not going to be able to do lavish gifts. I'll have a set budget of maybe $10, $15, $50 per person. And please, go ahead and give me a list of things that you would like within that price range. And if they don't appreciate it, then, that's just on them. But personally, I would rather have them have that moment of a brief moment of, oh, I'm upset because I didn't get this lavish gifts that I'm normally used to getting versus me paying for it in June, July, August of me trying to get out of this debt
Absolutely,
and feeling more
totally
financial
agree with
strain.
you.
And then this was another one we've kind of touched on too, is protecting your personal time. And that I chose these situations and scenarios as based on, things that I've heard and things that I know from my own personal life is, these are the things that tend to bring the most stress and anxiety and frustration around the holidays. And so, multiple holiday gatherings, especially like me, I come from a pretty big family and then my family is a blended family. So not only did I have holiday things for my mom's side, then I have my dad's side. And then, at one point I was married. And so then I had to, think about my in-laws at the same time. And so we found ourselves trying to entertain and go through all these different places in one day. I think we went to 3 or 4 Thanksgivings, and after that, we were kind of like, no, we can't do that anymore. Especially if we're driving from one side of town to the next side of town. And so we just had to set that boundary, or had to set that boundary. Okay, this year we're gonna do your family. This year we're gonna do this, or this day we're gonna do that. So that way you're not overexerting yourself um to all these different locations. And the same thing with your friends. You just kind of have to say, this is what I can do. And or and be stuck with that, and be firm, and not feel any guilt, because it's ultimately what feels best for you. Um, and then this is a big one too, handling unwanted conversations. So you have that family member that always likes to come up to you and say, "Hey, when are you gonna get married?" Or, "Hey, now that you're married, when are you gonna have a baby?" Or, "Hey, when are you gonna buy a house?" Or, "Hey, when are you gonna graduate college?" Or, "Hey, who did you vote for?" Because of the scenario we're in right now. Um, and so there's ways that we can tactfully decline those conversations, right, without, being disrespectful, or feeling like you're obligated to entertain those conversations. So, or to incite more, you know, I guess, conflict between them
Totally
two,
agree.
the two of them. So,
The mindset to be intentional. We already know we have that one or two relatives that is like, oh my goodness, so and so's here. You already know what that's going to end up, or either they're drinking, that can end up a certain place. Oh, and even when
hmm
you're going to holiday parties for work, right? People can be extra happy at those
hmm
parties
hmm
and doing the old turn up, as I call it. So you have to be mindful that you
hmm
being professional still at some level at those types of parties. The other part is, if you know so and so's going to be there, they always talk politics. Kind of just say, hey, this is not a conversation I want to have. I'm just making memories with my family. Something. So you be prepared instead of allowing people to catch you off guard. So that means that you can control your own narrative. You don't have to wait for them to catch you off guard, and then you find yourself trying to fumble over your words and not really knowing what to say. But again, as I said earlier, sometimes removing
Right.
yourself is the control. Removing yourself is the self control. So just
Yeah.
be mindful
Yeah.
of that, and intentional.
hmm hmm Yeah. Because, if you hear Aunt Sally Sue say something else about you gaining weight, maybe not going or being there, or just like you said, having your programming ready, so that when she says, "Oh, you look like you've gone up a size since the last time I saw you." Well, I'm just happy and healthy, or my doctor says I'm happy and healthy, or whatever response you want to give to that, or not even acknowledge it. "Oh, you know what? You look so nice tonight. I'm so happy that you're here. It's good to see you." You know, and not engage or allow that comment of whatever they reason they have. Or, "Don't you have something else to say other than talking about my weight? How is, just something that you feel comfortable, and putting that boundary up of not entertaining that conversation." And then this is something that's another situation that's kind of common that people experience, is the grieving of a loss. And it could be a family member that you're typically used to spending that way. So let's say if you're a widow, or you lost a parent or a child in some situations, or just a significant person in your life. And then something else that, as I was thinking about this, is there doesn't necessarily have to be a grief of a person leaving this earth. It could be a grief of a relationship. Sometimes people lose friendships, or you may be estranged from your parents or your siblings, or, even divorce. So there's a lot of different layers of grief that you can, a lot of different scenarios that can prompt grief, especially during the holidays. And so having that boundary of saying, I am grieving this, and this year I want to do this instead, and empowering yourself and advocating for yourself, and even just acknowledging the fact that this is what I'm experiencing. And so, I'm not going to be able to come to the family Christmas party because I'm still not feeling good after losing
You
this
know,
situation.
great points,
So,
Crystal. Accepting your feelings is number one. I think don't go back to what I always say, living your truth, be true to you, because sometimes we're trying to be something else again. People want us to, oh, you'll be okay, just come around the family, we'll give you your space, but that it's not just the end of that. It's going to be the questions, dear, what happened? They're going to start to go into the things. So if it's a divorce, you know, recognize what you can truly deal with. Maybe it's just too fresh, and not sit the holiday out, but maybe it's stay at home and I do something different for myself, right? Starting new memories. I don't want to
mhm,
make it
mhm,
that easy or minimize it because sometimes it just isn't. Maybe Christmas is that I am crying. So what I always tell my clients, just allow grief
mhm,
to have its process, and trust the process, right? When you
mhm,
lose someone, whether it's due to death or separation or divorce, it can even be a past, right? It can be a memory of going through this. I know that every year
mhm,
holidays come around and I get a certain way. I remember that person, and so keep in mind um, that grief has different stages, and so you don't have to feel rushed. I would say,
mhm,
nobody's chasing you. This is your journey of grief, and you take it one day at a time, one step at a time, until you come to a place where the holidays aren't
mhm,
sad and you're not depressed, but now I'm able to celebrate that person. And so keep that in mind, that grief doesn't look the same for everyone, and how people walk through it is different. Be true to yourself and give yourself some grace in what you're dealing with. It's important.
mhm. Yeah, I agree. Grace. I think that's the most significant thing. And then pause for questions. And so I just this time I would encourage you to, pause, reflect, think about things, think about situations and scenarios, and just journal it down, or even, send down a question, and you know, make a plan for that particular um situation. And so the overall theme of this conversation webinar is managing your mental health. And so, of course, we've touched on, things that could trigger stress or how you can take care of yourself. But there are situations in which, if you're already facing challenges with your mental health, or you have a history of mental illness, that it may even be more of a challenge, or it may exacerbate the symptoms. And so one of the things I really wanted to address is, how can you manage your mental health? Or maybe you're a person that maybe has your mental health condition in remission, or a place where it's managed, but you don't want it to go into a sour place based on some of the scenarios. And so this particular portion of it will just talk about tips on, mental health and issues. And so what I want to first do is just, recognize some of the warning signs of mental health issues. Like I mentioned before, 64% of the individuals existing mental health conditions say that their symptoms get worse. And so just to have the comparison of what anxiety looks like versus depression. And of course, there are some of these things that, considered to be normal, but when they persist or interfere with your daily life, then that may be an issue or sign that, there might be time to escalate it or bring it up to treat it. Um, so, if your sadness is impacting you being able to go and function and do the things that you would typically do, then that might be
And I
warrant
would
some
tell you
attention from you.
exactly you had it on the next slide. You know, when you are dealing with those seasonal kind of depression, um, consistently, when you find yourself getting or becoming, seasonal disorder, holiday blues, um, recognize and again, live in your truth. It does not mean that this is not something that you can't get over. You know, walk through it in a way that you have to get help. Sometimes it's not. I would say backing up and doing the double check on another friend, but truly acknowledge your symptoms and reach out like you would if you were going to see your doctor. I say that people think of therapy, well, oh, I don't want to see a therapist and all of this other stuff, but we go to the doctor when we're not feeling well. We try to attempt to try to self medicate at home, like get the band aid, or this cough is going a little longer. And though when it's time and you know that's a lot deeper or it's a lot worse than what you think, then you take the time out and you go to the emergency room or you make an appointment. So I think with that in mind, make sure that you take time to acknowledge what you just need help with. You don't always have the band aid at home to put over that. Get the help that you need.
Mhm. Yep, I agree completely. And like you mentioned, some people may not recognize, and it wasn't until I was in my own journey of understanding mental health and through my own personal lived experience that and I personally don't experience, the seasonal affective disorder, but it was one of the things that was brought to me in the education that I received. And it makes sense because I have seen and I have experienced people who, regularly around this time of the year, they seem to experience a decline. So it's quite common, but I think that right now a lot of people aren't speaking about it or have the awareness or even have the language to mention, hey, the holidays is not a fun time for me. Something happens within my
Right.
brain or with me where I tend to get sad. And so I feel like, on the other side of that is, you understanding and accepting it, but also advocating for yourself to say, you know what, once again, go back to the boundaries. Knowing that I have this decline in my mental health, I need to take care of myself, which means that I'm going to limit the things that, I don't feel like I have the capacity to do, due to this disorder. And then just some of the things that I, wanted to bring more awareness of some of the symptoms that you may feel with the seasonal affective disorder. Um, and then just kind of given that caveat, if it's lingering for a longer period of time, like you mentioned, it may not, certainly if you sprain your ankle or you hurt your ankle and you're not able to walk on it a month later, most people would say, okay, you know what, it's been a month. Let me go see my doctor to make sure it's not broken or need, some other procedure to make it feel better. So the same thing with your mental health. After a few weeks, I would assume that you may want to just kind of elevate it a little bit and say, hey, maybe talk to your medical doctor, or maybe, you know, a lot of companies have an EAP program for their employees. Or, even now they have so many tools and tips and resources that you don't even have to talk to anybody. You can text in and say, hey, this is what I'm feeling. And you can get the resources that may benefit you for that particular situation. And so, it's just some other things that I felt like would be beneficial to help with your holiday mental health. Maybe you're not on the spectrum of having an extreme disorder, but maybe it's just to keep your mental health intact. And so what I came up with was peace, to have peace. And so P would be for plan ahead. So organize your schedule, be proactive, be intentional, like you've mentioned several times about your time. And then E is embracing saying no. So saying no to something that does not feel right for you, your boundaries, and acknowledge your feelings. So whether that's feelings of grief or sadness, or if it's feelings of, hey, I don't really want to do this, acknowledge your feelings, and then care for your body. So practicing self-care, getting enough sleep, making sure that you get enough exercise, you're feeding yourself good, nutritious foods, because obviously the holidays is a time where we indulge into more of the comfort foods, but kind of finding a little balance, so not eating the comfort food for weeks on end, maybe pick a couple of days here and there, and that way you get some balance in your body is in a good place. And then final thing is just practice being present and engage in mindfulness. So you engage in mindfulness. And so being present, being aware, giving yourself the gift of being present, and allowing yourself to really enjoy that moment so that you're not so wrapped up. And I speak for myself is that there's sometimes I was so wrapped up in making sure that everything was orchestrated and everything looked right that I didn't allow myself to have the gift of presence and awareness of, my kids are opening the gifts and I'm happy that they're enjoying their gifts, or hearing my aunts and uncles laugh and enjoying that versus me being distracted by all of the things that were rolling around in my mind. So I would encourage people to do that and give themselves the gift of being present. And then just a little bit more about mental health, just because I still feel like there's still a gap in um, knowledge when it comes to speaking candidly about mental health, and understanding what the stigma is and how it impacts people. And even, this could even be something that comes up with families during the holidays, is that, some people of certain generations or certain demographics or certain cultures don't believe in this whole mental health thing, or talking about mental health. And so understanding how that stigma can impact yourselves and others. And so, you know, one of the things that I've heard, and I think it's been like a commercial or some kind of informative thing about um, mental health, is you'll see where someone's like, "Oh, the depression, you're not depressed. You just need to pray about it. Or you're not depressed. You just need to get up and get up. Or it's not that bad. You have it that it's not that terrible." And so you may hear some of those things over the holidays because, family are getting together, they're reconnecting, and they may have some thoughts and opinions that may not align. But just understanding, even just yourself, being able to understand that when you have those negative beliefs and stereotypes, it may make someone feel judged or rejected. And so having conversations like this one, or having normalizing conversations about mental health, just because, you know, you'll know that Uncle Buck has diabetes and he can't have the peach cobbler. So why is it more taboo to have Bo talk about him, trying to regulate his emotions after losing, his dog, or, so it's just have empathy, show support, but also advocate for yourself and know that it's perfectly okay to no matter where you are on the spectrum of mental health, that as long as you're aware and acknowledging it and working on it, that, I mean, it's normal. It's normal for most people. And um, another thing too is wanted to address is, well, who do I turn to? And Davina, you mentioned is jumping off the dump truck to your family and friends. But at a certain point, especially if you're struggling, it may be necessary to kind of bump it up to the next level, especially if it's something where you're not getting what you need from the family members, or maybe you're overloading the family members, or you want to be able to have a unbiased opinion. And so one of the things as far as education, as I always emphasize, is that therapy is not necessarily always for mental illness and treating mental illness. Someone that has a major mental health condition. it can be used to work through something like holidays and conflict, and um, just to go in and work through how to learn how to set boundaries with someone else or be able to communicate and advocate for yourself. So you don't always have to be sick to go see a therapist or a counselor. They can be used as a tool, as a resource to kind of help you learn to communicate better and more effective and express yourself. So you can look at a counselor or therapist. That's someone you can go in and talk to, get healthy coping strategies, get more insights about your mental health. Can be offer a space for you non-judgment where you're not judged to talk about certain things. And then in the case of you're experiencing, stress or anxiety or depression, or you feel like you need maybe some more help, a medical doctor or a psychiatrist is someone that is licensed to can prescribe, medication. But it is something that is an option for those that may need that additional support and that additional help. So that's just another option. And then you also have, and then this just kind of goes into more specifics about what a therapist is versus a psychiatrist, just because I know that there's a gap in knowledge as to you're thinking that you go to see a therapist and you immediately you're going to be lay on this couch and they're going to give you medication. That's not the case. In fact, if a therapist, I think, give you medication, I would, be a little bit wary of that because they're not typically licensed to do that unless they have, you know, license to do so. Uh, and then psychiatrists, although some of them then will talk to you and have a very therapeutic approach, but they are also able to give you medication. So if they need something to balance your mood or something of that nature, which they go through, they're testing to see that, then you're able to do that as well. And then you and then this last section is about dealing with grief. And I felt like this was a perfect quote to talk about the feeling of grief. I always feel like grief is like riding a roller coaster. You think that you're in a good, safe space, and all of a sudden you plummet, and then you're dropping again, and you go back up, and so you just kind of have to learn to ride the wave of grief. That's how I've um, come to terms with it. And so in this quote, it's saying grief is the price we pay for love. So to have grief is to mean that we have loved something or someone. So, um,
It does down to much, but eventually it gets easier.
right. And so, of course, this is another statistic that kind of allows you to see that if you are one of the individuals, 60 of the 64% that feel like the holidays intensify their sense of loss, that you're not alone, and that this holiday season can make you feel a more of a longing or highlight your loneliness because, most people know the feeling of, oh, I'm going to this holiday party yet again, and I don't have my significant other, or I don't have a significant other. Or maybe a reminder that, you lost this person. And so, reminding yourself that you're not alone when it comes to grief. And one of the things that I mentioned 'cause throughout my whole grief experiences with grief, one of the most helpful things or strategies that I've implemented is honoring that memory because oftentimes when it comes to grief, and I'm just going to speak my own personal experiences, sometimes when you don't want to feel those uncomfortable emotions and feelings, or you want to say, oh, or you try to put a time limit on, oh, it's been 20 years, or it's been 10 years, or it's been 6 months. I shouldn't still feel this way. You kind of suppress or try to, um, I guess, try to, um, stuff down that feeling of, I don't want to feel this way anymore, or try to talk yourself out of that. But in my experience, sitting in that and honoring that memory, it has been very beneficial and actually helps me heal through the grief. And so the example here is, let's say you have a family member that's passed, or maybe your grandmother's favorite recipe. So rather than just sitting and trying to not acknowledge that this is how I'm feeling, why not honor her by doing one of her favorite recipes, or her famous recipe, or going through and maybe eating her favorite pie that she used to always make, and look through pictures of her and talk about great stories. So that way you're still acknowledging that place in your heart that has that longing for that person, but at the same time, you're not pushing it down or resisting it. I always have the visual of someone trying to push down like a beach ball in the middle of the water. Like you're continue trying to push down, but eventually it's going to pop up. And that's kind of how I feel like when you try to push down or stuff down emotions. And so sit in that, honor that memory. Now, I'm not saying to, you know, spend the entire day, but maybe saying, okay, Thursday night, I'm going to sit and watch her favorite movie, eat her favorite dinner that she used to prepare, and talk about her, or look at um, photos of her to honor her. And then I'm going to start on Friday and enjoy where I am now. So just find a way to honor them, whether it's lighting a candle, sharing a memory, doing a dish, do that. And then just kind of go along with expectations. Be realistic. You can't put a time limit on grief. Grief is something that I feel like you'll live with for the rest of your life. And so you don't have to force yourself to be festive if it doesn't feel right. Focus on what you can manage and just be gentle with yourself, you know? And then just going back to acknowledging your feelings and acknowledging where you are. I feel like that's very important when it comes to grief. Okay. And so we've talked about a lot of things tonight. Um, but just overall, I want to summarize and give you like some strategic and strategies that you can implement, is to have a healthier, happier holiday season, is to prioritize your well-being. Don't feel like it's being selfish. It's necessary. And then also make sure you take time for you, and do what really brings you joy and peace and makes you feel fulfilled. And then remember, again, it's okay to say no to preserve your mental health. And then just commit to creating healthier traditions that uplift but don't drain you. And you deserve to have a season that's enjoyable and um, brings you with peace and balance and joy. And just take care of yourself just as much as you take care of everyone else.
Take care of
Um,
yourself too.
yes. And so should create a space for questions if there are any. And I want to thank you for attending. I truly, truly appreciate you taking the time out of your evening to spend time with us. I felt it was very important to give us a space to talk about some of the things that some people may be feeling. I know for me, sometimes with the holidays, I can feel that way. And just to kind of remember that the holidays don't have to be stressful, you don't have to be frazzled, that it can be enjoyable, and that you can have peace. So, if there are any other questions, remember that I will be sending out an email with some materials for you to review to kind of go over this. I will send out the slide presentation as well as information if you want to reach out to myself, Crystal, or Davina. And if you have any follow-up questions, then we can send them to us there. But once again, I appreciate you for joining us. I look forward to the next conversation. And I encourage you to follow me and sign up for my email newsletter because I will continue to host more of these community conversations about different topics and themes. There will be some that will both be in person, and there will also be some that are here, like tonight, online. And so that way, if you follow me on social media or you sign up for my email newsletter, you will be informed and you'll be able to join the next conversation. So, Davina, do you have any other last pieces of advice before we end for
And
tonight?
what you
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. And did you have a specific
yeah, they can
place where they
find me
reach
at
out, or you just want
Psychology
to
Today. The last
have
name
them?
is Linguist, like a linguist. And we'll be
Okay.
able to also connect with me. They'll be
Mm-hmm.
able to connect with me on at gocurist.com. I'm in the Plano office. And so feel free to reach out there or schedule a
Mm-hmm.
consultation, 15 minutes, which is free.
Well, I genuinely appreciate you, Davina, for spending your time and giving us this wonderful nuggets of wisdom. And I truly hope you have a great
You're
holiday
welcome. Thanks
season.
for
And until the next conversation, thank you. Okay.